welcome back to the ROOP Lecture Series. Today we want to continue talking about China's social credit system. A few more months here, it's going to be a law to go into effect for every Chinese person and foreigners living in China. And already some numbers that are coming in. So far we're looking at about 3 million, close to 3 million Muslims that are being detained in Xinjiang in the northwest of China and are heavily under surveillance using the credit system and their, it's probably a very aggressive and invasive form of that credit system up there because they've got checkpoints and they're measuring people's usages of electricity and gas and very invasive to find out what people are doing, where they're going, specifically Muslims. That's who they're targeting up there. The problem is that they are using it as a test tube, if you will, and this software is being pushed, and the system, this smart city system is it's being imported now. China is selling this model to Venezuela and to Bolivia and Uruguay, so it's spreading. That's one thing, not too good. Second thing, like I mentioned, they're already targeting very specifically and very aggressively up in Xinjiang against the Muslims. It's a big problem there. And the third major statistic that we're seeing now coming to light is that they're the largest group of people that are being blacklisted within China. They've got 13 million now that cannot buy airplane tickets or make high-dollar purchases or get bank accounts and are being publicly shamed. They have a different ringtone. All sorts of things are doing over there to highlight this special population of people who have been blacklisted. And the largest percentage of people who are on that list are wealthy businessmen and business owners, right? So at first that may seem a little surprising to think about that. Why would they be putting these people on the blacklist, major contributors to their society and their surely their economic good fortune in that country? But when you realize that this credit system is a surveillance system, these are people that you would want to make sure are complying. You know, they have the means and they have the influence to cause problems and to be a real cause detriment to the government. So it does make complete sense why they might be the most, after Muslims in the Northwest, why this group of people, anybody with a lot of money and influence, a businessman in China, why they would be under the thumb maybe more than somebody who would have few followers and not make so much money and what have you. So it is about control. This is becoming more and more obvious. It was apparent before, it is very obvious now. Well, jumping on our side of the pond, we've had a couple of interesting past months here. Speaking of control, our big tech companies out in Silicon Valley have been clamping down on conservative voice on their platforms. We saw this already in last August with Alex Jones and a handful of other people at that time, but it has gotten a lot more extensive, and now you have a combination of all sorts of tactics being used, whether demonetizing on YouTube, whether we have shadow banning, shadow censoring, diverting traffic from their platforms and not giving all the information or updates and everything to followers. Yeah, so a lot of tricks up their sleeves, a lot of different tactics being employed to gauge and determine and control. This whole system is about control. Control the narrative, in our case, with these companies. But now we're also seeing that there are connections and ties to a financial blacklisting as well. So we're talking about, over half dozen started out early on, probably, who was the first? Who knows? But we had some early names there. Alex Jones, of course, financially was hit. And then we had Laura Loomer, who was closed out of her Chase account, bank account. also being banned from Twitter and PayPal. So a lot, the web, the tentacles now are growing into other industries and other companies. Other people from Chase Bank, other conservatives that have had their accounts hindered, blocked, closed in some way, shape, or form would be Robert Spencer, looking at Robert Spencer, a critic of Islam, looking at David Horowitz, MasterCard and Visa, both cut off, his access to his account, and just disrupting up financially for some of these people. And there's more than a dozen. I mean, more than a half dozen. There's been quite a few. So then we had in May a bunch of people kicked off of Twitter and Facebook. Candace Owens comes to mind. There again, they were highlighting people, calling them hate agents. More recently, Facebook has announced that they do have a system for ranking people, declaring them a hate agent. And a couple things that I found interesting, you can go do research on that yourself and find out what exactly they do on this list. But some of the interesting things, you can be guilty by association. So if somebody is deemed a hate agent and you begin to follow and attend their whatever gatherings, whatever, and they can start to highlight you. You can be guilty by association. We also have no input into that definition of what a hate agent is, so there again, very little oversight. I think they think they're trying to be transparent by telling us there's a system, but we don't have any part of that, and we meaning people who have an account with Facebook, very little say on our end, very little input on our end. And yet a lot of these rules are for us and for shaping the narrative and for trimming off the narrative they don't want, right? So we are seeing that, well, and you have to consider something else. Facebook has over 2 billion accounts. So you have a number. You've got a score. I have a score. We all have a score if you've got an account with them. They are ranking you. They've also admitted to weighing in your private and when they become public comments. They can be weighed against you as well. So a lot of information, I think there again, they're trying to think that they're being upfront by telling us this, but the reality is that the noose is being put around our necks electronically, and free speech is being called into question now. And I think if you're an American and you're hearing this and you are not alarmed by any of the things that I've just said, then you have made a willful decision to look the other way, and that's on you, and that's your choice. But I also think we have a responsibility now that much of what we're seeing with the social credit system in China is here. It is an application. You have to think too, with over 2 billion accounts on Facebook, plus another billion plus in China that have a score of their own, separate, but yeah, figure almost half the world now has been given a score of some sort, which does take into account their social behavior, their public and private comments. And it does and can have financial reprisal connected on that. We have entered very quickly into a new phase, I think, and which is why we wanted to talk about China's social credit system in the first place. Honestly, I didn't think it would happen this quickly, but it is. And now with China selling their software to other countries around the world, this is a situation that most Americans need to be on top of. They need to be proactive with. And they need to get information for themselves to figure out, where am I on this, and what do I need to do to protect free speech, and also what are the alternatives, what are other platforms that we can create or explore to keep social media both accessible, because we like it, it's not going to go away, but to keep it fair and balanced and inclusionary for everybody's voice. That's the goal. So, or should be. Maybe not. Maybe not. Right? It's not the goal, obviously, for big tech industries. And I don't know. I think we're going to see more on this subject. I will be continuing to follow along. We have a panel discussion in October here at Ferris State University, and we will bring some of the faculty that are working in these industries to come and speak. In the meantime, we'll be continuing with the updates, and thank you for tuning in and for joining along. We'll talk with you again real soon. Bye-bye.